Hi, everyone. So, Audrey and I are here reporting from our NYSE. So, we've been working for a long time on multiple different decks, with our idea being we wanted to make a team to find the best way to break Squelcher and Flow State, as we viewed those two cards as the strongest in the format.
Yeah,
We worked together with a team of 7 people, being the two of us, Justin, Aced, Bill, Kelvin, Dan, and
Arjun, who couldn't make
Arjun.
it. Yeah, Arjun couldn't make it, unfortunately, but he
And
was
Ace left
definitely one
earlier.
there. Yeah, he's not here because he left sooner. Yeah. All right. Where I want to start? We can talk about the intent, I guess, of the whole thing.
Yeah. So for those of you who don't know, NYSC is a tournament where the top 8 get power. This has been happening almost every year for the last 13 years, with the exceptions of the COVID years. And we wanted to come into this event with the best deck. From our time in the format, we had loved Drain Breach, but with Squelcher coming to favor, we were starting to move away from that. And we wanted to find a good way to use Squelcher. And with the printing of Flow State, we thought that those two together could lead to combo decks that could last against Frog and other decks because you could play small ball a lot better than you could in the past. So we started branching out with a lot of different decks during our early testing. We tried some Breach variants, which Audrey will talk about in a second. We talked about Jeskai control variants and Tinker. So if Audrey, you want to start with the Breach variant?
Yeah, I can start with Bridge Variant. This game, I'm just gonna like speed run through it. Because of Ryan Hayes, there was this video that I made a while back about this like consultation deck. I think it was exactly actually this one with this like consultation Thoracle stuff with like Frog and Breach, whatever. I mean, as Matt was saying, this was just a response to how bad it felt to play against specifically PO because they main decked 2 of the Squelchers. And I tried a lot of versions. You can see here like a long list of stuff. Eventually adopting the Squelcher ourselves. With more and more stuff, like just going deeper into the rabbit hole, to be honest, until I finalized in this version, which I thought was sufficiently good. It's just that at the very end, the week of NYSE, it started doing very poorly. I think starting on Saturday, Dave Kaplan, had an event qualifier for NYSC, and I went there and did very poorly, mostly because I was sleep deprived. But it was also that I faced 2 Tinker decks, and it felt like they were just, even without Squelcher, just like punching through. A big deficiency of this deck is that it's not that good into Frog either. So yeah, ultimately I just abandoned it because I was the only person in the testing group playing it, I think.
Yeah.
And ultimately, I think I took Bridge first. So I took Tinker for a start first, and it didn't feel good. And then Bill made this version, which I guess we can talk later, where because the group in parallel was just playing Tinker. There were 2 versions at first. We had Esper and we had Grixis. I think Justin and you and Arjun were very quickly on the Grixis version. I think Arjun was trying to make Doomsday work, but I think we didn't get there either. And then I played Breach with Tinker, and I ended up signing out Breach more often than anything else. And having a Tinker deck play well into Frog was very surprising, but it turned out to be a pretty fine matchup.
100%. Um, and we realized with the Breach being worse, we wanted to move away from that and go closer to stuff like Yogwill. During this time, we were also testing PO, and one of our teammates, Dan, which you saw in the picture earlier, ended up playing one of those variants where it was PO with Null Rod. But the rest of the team felt very confident in Tinker, even though this deck was very solid at being able to leverage Null Rod while still having a somewhat combo-y game plan due to the flow states.
Yeah, I also tried
So,
this one, and it felt a little decaffeinated, but I am also notoriously not a good PO player, and so I also abandoned this one. Dan did
yeah,
take this to top 4, though.
yeah, he performed very well with it and showed that the deck was very solid. I think the big thing and the reason why more of us weren't playing it is because we got very sold on the Tinker Shell.
Yeah.
And one of the really cool things about the Tinker Shell is how it evolved over our time testing. because it started with Bill wanting to play Grixis Tinker with Squelcher, and that birthed the idea. From there, we had added some extra cards. So, for example, Audrey and I were pushing for Squelcher, which Bill had added to his initial list. And then Justin came in with an amazing idea, which completely changed the deck, being the one of Hull Breacher and Time Twister in the main. And those two cards were so very important because they helped our Raker and Ring matchups a lot. But also, just Twister on its own is very strong in this deck with all these tutors, because so often you could go from having one combo piece, Twister, and then you just win because you find the other piece of the combo, whether it be Key Vault, finding your Tinker, finding a Demonic Tutor, or just even more action to keep pushing. And because we had all that in this deck, those additions were super important and even let us run more Hull Breachers in the sideboard for games 2 and 3 against ring decks. So having all these different ideas coming together really helped create the deck and end up being what we were at this tournament for the majority of us. And it was a really cool way of building the deck because we all brought in our ideas, and from there we're able to make this deck which performs so well.
Yeah. Also, like, based on the meta, it's also sort of a reason why I at least stopped making the last 2 weeks of the metagame Monday in a way, other than work. It's also that we had been working this for like close to a month, I think, at this point. And I think we all had the impression that the meta was just fake because none of us were playing the challenges. Having Justin was very useful, but also like detrimental for him because he couldn't like put that into the content, right? So he had to play just random shit like Counterbind or whatever. And so ultimately, if you see here, there's not even a apparition of this deck or anything that plays it, right? All of these decks don't play Squelcher. Even Lurus Bridge, I think, plays one.
Yeah, one in the board.
Some versions, right? Sometimes Discovery plays it, I think. Yeah. Anyway, it didn't exist, but we knew it was extremely well performing. We were dropping 4-0 leagues like constantly. I think I had like at least 10 of those or something like that. And some of them were Breach Rock, but even then, like, we were playing a lot of this deck. And if you were playing online at that time, you would have seen us probably. I remember also dropping multiple matches to TonyScapone because he was testing. So if you see this spread, first of all, you don't see it, but also there's a lot of decks that, for example, we were not expecting as much dredge, and we'll talk about that later. But against any anti-combo deck, anti-combo deck, even Oath with Forces, it was just like very free. So this was a very good spread for what we thought was gonna be an approximation to NYSE, but also like, yeah, we truly believe that like Squelcher was a broken card, and so play the broken card. What does it enable? It just like it enables jamming as much as possible, and so we just put as many jams as possible into the deck without having it to be too clunky. And I think we landed on this like 2-ish, 3 combos sort of with like a little bit extra tutors. Cards that you would miss usually in a Tinker deck. I think the biggest one would be Top, Karn. You usually would see Desert or Monastery Mentor if you were playing white. That sort of stuff is just missing here. But just like, and honestly, even then, we just have like a removal spell in the main deck, right?
It's just the Chain of Vapor.
This deck is just jamming. Like there's no eject button. It's just like going all in. The sideboard does cover that a lot, and that's why a lot of the sideboard is about removing things. But yeah, it's a pretty, just a downhill without breaks kind of deck, and it performed very well.
Yeah. And a big advantage of our deck was if you look at the mana base, we had 2 islands. Oh, yeah, so between the 2 islands and the flow states, when you're playing against frog decks, which usually Tinker can have a tough time with, we were just being like, okay, I'll make my land drops, I'll play slow, I'll flow state, and eventually I'm going to have enough cards that you can't keep answering me. Mm-hmm. You're going to run out of counterspells, and I'll get something through. And the second something gets through, that game is going to snowball into our favor so fast.
Yeah. Especially because of the Lorians, now we are allowed to just play force fetches, which is actually pretty insane. 14 lands, I think, is what we had in this deck, and yeah,
13, yeah,
13. Was it 13 the last one? Maybe we had. No, yeah,
no, we had 13 lands.
Even one less than I thought. Okay, so yeah, pretty spectacular. I think there was even at one point we thought about playing 3. because the deck can just support it. You have like just 2 red spells that you just need to cut once, basically. I think the problem was just like you really do need them for the sideboard, and against the null rod decks, you don't have always access to red. So I think this is still fine, but
Yeah,
you know,
we just needed it for those sideboard pieces.
yeah. I think later evolutions, we started thinking that ley lines were not that great, so we cut one, I think, for Commandeer or MBT. There's like different. Everyone in the team played slightly different versions, I think. This time you and
Only
I
in the
might have played
sideboard
the
though.
same one. Yeah, the sideboard. The main deck I think was everyone the same. You and I think, ended up playing the same version, Matt. I think Calvin played a little different, and Bill was playing Karn in the main, and also 2 Core Steel Cutters, I believe, in the sideboard, which was my tech for
Yep.
Frog.
And I mean, Corey Steelcutters is super good for Frog, but the thing is, we already had a good Frog matchup.
Yeah,
We didn't need the additional push because
absolutely.
we were beating them consistently.
Yeah, for sure.
Because the games you lose against Frog, typically when you're playing Tinker, is because they're forcing everything, which Squelcher beats, and they're wastelanding you off of mana with a Null Rod. But we've got 2 islands, so they just can't do the games that they want to have against us, which lets us beat them because we're just pushing through.
And more often than not, you're stuck on 2 lands and you cannot stock up. But now with Floasted, you can just. Usually, you would float it for the 3rd land, so your stock ups could keep going.
Yep.
And that usually it used to be enough. In fact, I think I've like some of the frog matchups that I won, I didn't even ever have to tinker. I just had like so much more mana than them. And I think this was our last attempt where I was starting to cut to 2 ley lines, I think. And at that point, I was thinking, the team was either 4 ley lines or 3, and then 2 we thought was just like useless to have 2. Because I wanted the second Hercule because I was expecting a lot of Raker, but also I really liked MBT. In fact, there's like Justin said that I had the biggest Commandeer propaganda because I commandeered the Tezzeret to have a Time Vault infinite. And I think literally the night before, you and Calvin finished in this version.
Yeah, so our thoughts were NYSE is a very different meta than any other vintage meta because it is a proxy friendly meta. And because of that, Dredge is typically the lowest seen deck during that meta, which at Eternal Weekend you're going to see Dredge because it's not proxy friendly. Online, people just like playing Dredge, so they're going to play it. But NYSE is a little pocket because people like playing decks that are blue or decks that have Mistress Workshop. And so we decided we're just going to ignore Dredge. If we face it, that's fine. We can take 1 loss and still top 8. But we're going to use every sideboard slot to get us better matchups into stuff like Sphere, Doomsday with the opposition agent, even into Jewel, just being able to have Commandeer and Mindbreak Trap. So we thought that those 3 cards were better than having the ley lines, and we just want to be able to help every other matchup.
Yeah. Oppo Agent was also sort of like a gentleman's agreement to not play against each other because it really Fs the Tinker decks up. But it's also that, for the top 8, it's kind of like everyone for themselves in a way. But Oppo Agent was also some of these things where it's just like, okay, if you play against Tinker, you really want Oppo Agent. But it's also like Tony had been doing very well with his Transmute Jewel, spoilers. But then that was a little worse against Oppo Agent. And so we also thought that it would be good. I never got to cast it. I know build it and got very in the Tinker mirror against Asper, and they just won exclusively because of Oppo Agent, pretty much.
Yeah, I mean the Oppo agent stole their opponent's Black Lotus, 2 lands that they fetched, and a Bolus Citadel because they had Tinker in hand. So it was just like, okay, I'm gonna take that.
It's just a sideboard full of hammers, basically. Like Portal, we even started bringing Portal against Frog and realized that it was also very, very good. And Sphere, like this card, I boarded in a lot of matchups as well. I think probably Sphinx is the least one because most of the Frog decks that we faced were Esper, yeah, and they are incentivized to keep the plows because of Squelcher. I don't think we're bringing both Hull Breachers either, so we don't have the 3. Like usually in these decks, if you overwhelm the removal, that's fine. But I don't think we wanted to do that.
Yeah. And the philosophy behind Portal against Frog and other decks that you typically don't bring it in against is if you're being proactive, you're getting Citadel. You're not going to get Sphinx that's just a 6/6. But if you're being reactive and you need to slow the game down, Portal does that amazingly because not only does it do a little board wipe, but it gives you chump blockers if you need them, frog as a way to just recoup on card advantage, or even just bowmasters to say you don't get to ancestral and treasure cruise and all that. So portal was such a pivotal card to just end the game against frog
It was also
when you were behind.
for me. It was hard to weave a little because the 2 times that I did it, my opponent just had dig through time, so they just exiled all of their creatures, or they played lures to just start replaying their creatures. But I mean, it's still, like removing 3 creatures usually is sufficient to get enough space, right? This deck doesn't need to end the game with their hammers. All of these are here to just get space. Generally, right? Like Hercule just gets space, a Braid is for the new rods or for the Lavinias or whatever, Long Advice and thing. Like, all of these are just about, Commandeer sometimes ends the game, but that's Christmas Land.
Yeah. It is, like you say, mostly about getting the extra space that you need to get through with your other combo pieces.
Right. So we've talked about that for a while. Let's go over the rounds. So round 1, what did Matt do?
So I was against Dissolutionist, if you know him from online. He's a very big brewer in the vintage space and pre-modern. And he is the person who invented, or popularized at least, the Gifts Breach deck with mana drains. He's a very strong player, and so going into him round 1, I knew who it was. I knew what I was going to play against because of that, and I knew that I had to play very tightly to be able to get every edge possible to end up winning. The first game, he opened up with a very strong start of land, 3 Moxen, he had counter spells in hand, and he played his Luris. And we ended up in this spot where I kept countering his stuff, he'd counter my stuff, and by the time I tinkered, I was down to 8 life from the Luris beats, and I had a Force of Negation on top. He then tried to chain my Bullet Citadel. I had to use the Force Negation, and it was basically too late at that point because now I'm at 5 life. They hit me with Luris to 2, and I can't do much more. But game 2 was where Squelcher really shined, because he kept a slower hand game 2 that had, I believe he told me there was 4 counter spells in it, and I dropped a turn 2 Squelcher, which basically said, you have no hand anymore, it does nothing, and I just did card advantage spells until I found Vault Key, and it just showed that Squelcher just says, unless you have removal, your counter spells, your whole hand is invalid. In game 3, I had the nuts. I had Ancestral, Mox, Tinker, Force, Mana Crypt, Key. So I had a turn 2 Time Vault with the Key, and he scooped to that, and that was just an insane hand that's very hard to beat for any deck.
Yeah, for me, I lost my first match, which was a little disappointing to start, because we knew from the beginning that we had 93 people. I think last year we both played. I landed 5-2, and I got out of top 8 because it was 5-1-1 was the cut. So we know X and 2 is out. So you had 1 loss. That was also part of like the idea of Dredge. Is like you have 1 loss, so it can might as well be Dredge and beat everything else. The one thing that I remember here was just like sort of my inexperience with the deck, because I had been playing Frog Bridge for the majority of the testing sessions, and it was mostly just that on a turn that I didn't have to push, I tried to push in game 1 with the Chain of Vapor under Lavinia. They bounced it to bounce my Squelcher, and then I didn't have enough mana to replace Squelcher and Tinker, and so I just went for Tinker. They had Force for the... what was it? Oh, no, never mind. They chained my Squelcher, and then I sacked my chain to bounce my Sapphire so I could do everything, and then they had Misstep for my chain, and then I didn't have enough mana to do everything, so I tried to Tinker through it, and they had Force of Negation, and from there I just had 1 land, and I died, but I could have just flow state twice and keep going. So that was the first, and then the second, I think I just had like a relatively slow hand where I tried to set up a turn 2 Squelcher into Tinker, and they had double Bowmaster for it, and then when I tried to Tinker, they had the Force as well. So pretty straightforward loss for me. I think I was starting like 10 to 15 minutes. But also just, yeah, like you don't necessarily want one of these. My opponent was also pretty good on Esper. And so, yeah, that was the start of the tournament. Matt is 1-0, I'm 0-1. I think everyone else also won. And then we can talk about round 2.
So for round two, after having beaten Sean, I felt pretty high, and I felt like as long as I kept being locked in and thinking, well, I was going to be able to continue with these good hands. Um, I ended up playing against Raphael, also known as Log T, someone who also top aided this event, and I knew that he was going to be on Esper Luris. So I looked at my opening hand for the first one, and it was a hand with a bunch of mana, but it only had one stock up and only one land. And all the other mana was off color, so I decided to mulligan that, knowing it was Frog. And my next hand had three lands, one Moxen, a Squelcher, um, and two draw spells. So I put one land down and just played the long game where I dropped my Squelcher and I just slowly did flow states every turn, knowing that this advantage was going to add up over the course of the game. And it took them a very long time to get any threats on the board, really, because I'd forced the one frog that they had, and they couldn't force back because of Squelcher. And after that, it just kind of came to the point where I've drawn like 15 more cards than them. I dropped the combo. They killed Squelcher in response, but I had double force at the time, so it's just not much they could do. Game two was very similar to game one, where I kept another land heavy hand. I got my basic islands to play on. I dropped a Squelcher eventually and was able to protect it this time. And they dropped Stony Silence, but then they drew two Moxen in a row, and their Stony Silence ended up hurting them a lot more than me, because the hands I was keeping were these land heavy hands where they couldn't really wasteland me out. I only had one Mox in game two, and even with Stony Silence, like just getting hit by a Squelcher every turn hurt them a lot. Eventually, they dropped Bowmaster and Frog in a turn, and I just dropped Tinker into Portal, and they scooped to me reanimating their Frog because they had one card left in hand, and my hand was a full 7 despite having been playing spells every single turn.
Yeah, there's also this funny thing because sometimes they cannot remove the Squelcher due to like the life that they have left. So I had a couple of those too. For me, I got one of the coolest plays for my own. I played against Oath. Turn one, my opponent was in the play, I believe, and they dropped an Oko and a Oath that I stopped. And then I tinkered with the Oko in play. I think I got a couple spells, and then they animated my Tinker. I think I had to attack it like 2 or 3 times before I was able to kill the Oko, and then eventually I had just like enough things to just go for like a Lotus Ancestral Time Walk or something like that. It was pretty interesting. And then the second one is where the interesting play happened with Time Vault, where at one point I have Time Vault in play tapped, and my opponent has played an Oath that resolves, has Land and Orchard untapped, and then they pass a turn to me. And so one thing you can do with Time Vault is that once your opponent passes priority on their end step and you pass it back, you go to your turn, and then Time Vault is a replacement effect, so there's no priority that goes around. You can just decide to skip your turn and untap. My opponent said, okay, well, on your end step, I'm going to make a Spirit to activate my Oath, and I'm like, there's no end step. So basically, you can, if your opponent doesn't think about it, you can just untap. They miss the window to make a token because the Oath checks before triggering, so it will not trigger on an upkeep if there's no creature difference. And so that gave me an extra turn where I was able to first send it on a flow state that goes forced, and then my opponent was empty-handed, so I took an extra turn, I jog-wheeled, and I tinkered again, and then I went from there. So pretty cool play from them too. For round 3...
So round 3, I was against Jeremy Dankirk on Raker Shops. So I'd actually met him back when we were in Japan for Eternal Weekend. He's a very nice guy. He was on initiative then when we played each other, and this time he was trying out Raker Shops. He ended up being the first seed of this tournament once it ended. But we had some really interesting games where the first game, I had a very solid hand. It was going to be a turn 3 Tinker via Demonic Tutor. And so he played out his hand very quickly, and I was able to force the important pieces. And then he tried to do it a second time after I DT'd on my turn 2 for the Tinker. And he tried to go a second time. I then DT'd on my turn for Tinker, and then passed to him, having no cards left in hand. He top decks a Trinisphere, which completely changed the flow of the game, because now Tinkering for Citadel was not good at all. So I still had 2 forces in my hand after those, and I decided, okay, we're just going to play a long game. I'm going to stop them from resolving anything. They're taking 1 a turn to their mana vault. I just need to stop it long enough till I can get one of my creatures to start beating them down. And so I started forcing every play they made until I think 2 or 3 turns later I drew a Hull Breacher, which I played and started beating into them. They then played a Scrolling Crawler, which I went to my turn. I drew a Chain. So I passed it back to them, and the important thing is Scrolling Crawler draws you an extra card for both players, but because I had Hull Breacher, it didn't draw one for him. And the card I drew was Time Twister. So I then chained their Scrolling Crawler, Time Twisted them, and I drew a hand with another 2 forces, and they were already at 4 at that point. So they could only draw 1 card per turn, and it wasn't going to go through force, letting me win the game. Game 2, I kept a hand that was heavy on counterspells with Commandeer, hoping to steal a 1-ring, because I'd already been mulling to 6, and I didn't want to go any further. So I let their first couple plays resolve, but then they had Key, and they were trying to play top, and I was worried that that was going to give them too much advantage. So I forced it, even though I shouldn't have. They then proceeded with Trinisphere, and I had to force that as well, which meant I didn't have enough blue cards in my hand to commandeer the 1 ring that came the turn after, and that ring just took over the game. And then game 3, I kept a hand that had land, Black Lotus, Time Walk, 2 Hull Breachers, and a Lorien. So I went turn 1 land, Black Lotus, passing to them, trying to get the Hull Breachers down to slow them down. And they dropped, I believe, like 5 Mana Rocks, a Mishra's Workshop, and played the 1 ring. But I was able to flash in the Hull Breacher in response to that, get a treasure token, and then the next turn when they tried to play Talon Gates to get rid of my Hull Breacher, I put in the other Hull Breacher, and they scooped after that because they were just going to lose too quickly, and my hand was still pretty full. So they basically told me, do you have a force? I said yes, showed them the force, and they conceded.
Yeah, for me, I also had Ricker. This was one of the most interesting matches I think that I had. So my opponent basically had the same start every game. They either had like 2 crawlers by turn 2 or like 2 crawlers and like a flash Ricker. But basically at any point in the game where I was able to take an action that was relevant in a way, I had to face either 2 scholars and a flash Ricker or 2 scholars, 2 rakers and stuff like that. So game 1, the crawlers just hit me too quickly and I wasn't able to resolve anything that mattered. Game 2, this is where interesting happened. So Matt made a sideboard mapping sort of for his ideas. And we all had like a copy, and it was sort of meant to be a guideline, but I was a little stressed out at this point, and so I followed it blindly. And by turn 2, and I was facing again the double crawler into Flash Trigger. I'm like, okay, I need to mystical for Hercules, and I mystical, and I realized I don't have Hercules in my sideboard because Matt didn't put it in the mapping. And so at this point, I'm like, okay, well, we're a little screwed. I think I somehow miraculously got there. I think I ended up at 1 life, and I had to do like Hull Breacher plus an Abrade and then Yogs for the Abrade again so that I would not just die. And I assembled the combo like extremely just like every life point, every mana mattered. At one point, my opponent had played a ring but did not declare the trigger. And how the ring trigger works is that you can actually ignore the trigger, but the first time that it's relevant, it needs to be acknowledged, and if it's acknowledged, it's as if you didn't miss it. So at one point I realized that my only line possible is to ancestral my opponent with the Hull Breacher in place so that I get my 3 treasures. So I played a couple more things and then ancestral them, waiting to see if that was my tournament at this point or not. And then they said yes, it resolves, and so that means you've missed the trigger, and so we continue. I think we also had a judge call because of in this specific play, also the trigger, I had stolen a Tezzeret with Commandeer, and so the treasures that the Hull Breacher makes also make the Tezzeret go up, which we had a judge call, but basically after having made the treasures, I had to play a Long Goodbye, and in those situations you can say, okay, well, actually Long Goodbye is an instant, so technically I can respond to the triggers and still put that spell in the stack, and that's how the judge ruled there as well. And then game 3, I think it was something very similar, where like I was basically, I think, at the end of the 2, and I had to also go from like through the Tolarian basically at the last possible moment, and also had like a Hercule. I think at one point my opponent picked up the Flash Riggers with the Hercules Recall as well, and we had to like backtrack a little. But eventually, I just like got like a vault key basically on the last possible. I was at 1 life in both of my live records. I was at 1 life, both game 2, game 3, before I was able to establish the vault key loops. And now we get you're 3-0, I'm 2-1. So you, I think was this one you matched against Oath?
No, this is where I was against Bug with Joe Brennan. It was round 5 that I dove.
Also a great match. I was able to see half of it, I think. It was very good.
So the first game, I'm feeling like I have a great hand. I've got 2 lands, and they're not basics, but I've got a Vexing Bauble, a Squelcher, a Mox, and some card advantage. I think it's going to go great. And it takes a turn surprisingly quickly, as they were able to abrupt decay my Squelcher, and I'm looking at my force in hand thinking, oh, they're not going to be able to get rid of this, but they did, and they followed that up with a Collector Roof. And between that and the Deathrite Shaman, that just was eating at my life total. By the time I could do a combo with Tinker, they had already gotten a second Collector Roof down. So with our low removal game 1, I just knew I wouldn't be able to get rid of it and try and go for Time Vault Key. So they were able to get there very quickly, and it was pretty tough. Game 2, I got to do Squelcher into Citadel. So turn 1 Squelcher, turn 2 Citadel, and it let me just go through my entire deck. Like, it lined up so perfectly. I was going flow state, stock up, flow state, and basically just dropped Vault Key that same turn, since I was able to get Time Walk and then just take another turn. So that was just a very quick game where everything just kind of came together to give me that perfect lineup on top of my library. Game 3 was really interesting. They kept a hand that was no lands, but they had Black Lotus into Collector Roof plus Deathrite Shaman, hoping that I would have fetch lands, which our deck has 4, but I didn't use them on purpose. So I played very slowly there, where I played basic island, cycled, played another basic island, holding Mana Crypt in my hand, and also Key, because I didn't want to reveal those. They then passed to me, holding up 2 mana, and revealed to me after the game that they had another Collector Roof in hand, but wanting to hold up Spell Pierce. I, at that point, used my fetch to long goodbye their 1 Collector Roof. And that's an uncounterable spell for those of you who don't know, so the Spell Pierce couldn't do anything to stop it, so all of a sudden the floodgates were open. I then went for my Squelcher into Mana Crypt, Key, and then Tinker. And they had the Abrupt Decay for Squelcher, so they did that. I forced back, and that was the game. And they would have been able to stop it if it wasn't for the Squelcher with that Spell Pierce. But that's just another example of how Squelcher basically makes it so bad to hold back counterspells and not be proactive, because it just basically invalidates them completely. Even if you have the removal for them, sometimes it's just not enough because you're using so much mana that the 1 mana counter spells no longer are on because you can't pay for them.
Yeah. For me, this is where my tournament ended. I played against Eric Rachowski, a friend of ours. I knew immediately he was in Doomsday. And the game was actually mine to lose, at least game 1. So game 1, I had a very fast start. I think I had like Crypt, Sapphire, Land, and Whole Breacher in hand. And so when Eric went for Ponder, I think I fund the Force, and then I played Whole Breacher, they forced my Whole Breacher, I fund the Force, and then it resolved. They kept the land in hand, and so after all that, basically the board is, they have 2 lands, they kept their Ponder, and they have 2 cards in hand, and I go for Squelcher into Stock Up. And the Stock Up had, my hand has nothing, basically, and Stock Up was, I think, 2 lands, island, I think it was like Saga, Fetch, Island, or Surveil, something like that. But basically the 3 cards that are relevant are Mystical Tutor, Flusterstorm, and Island. In my mind, I spent like a minute thinking about this, about picking Island Fluster, just to protect myself from some weird stuff, but I couldn't come up with anything that would just be impossible to do against this whole breacher, and so I decided to take Mystical and Fluster with the thought of just Mysticaling for Twister and just finishing the game. But then Eric had like obviously like the whole breacher gig was up, and so his top card was just land. Drew the land, fetch. There you go, consultation into Thoracle, and just weaves it through. Whereas if I got like my island Fluster, I can stop them, and then from there it just win. Basically, just recognizing that the consultation line is the only thing that can win, because otherwise it's just untap. Even if I don't have any action, I'm dealing 5 a turn, and Doomsday just doesn't function through Hull Breacher, especially game 1. And so that was the idea, or just putting them low enough that even Necro is not an out, and they would not be able to Necro for that much because they would at 13. If they Necro too much, then I hit them again, and then they cannot draw anything else. And even then, you have to still be at least at 1 for Doomsday. And even then, like this Doomsdaying through a Hull Breacher is just super complicated. And so that was that. And then game 2, I think my hand was like 4 lands. I had them all on deck. I had to get like a 3-land stock of Fluster Pyro. Eric duressed me and took the stock up, and then I think the turn after they went for Gush, which I Pyroblasted, then Dig Through Time, which I Flustered, and then they had Jet, Dark Ritual, Doomsday with 1 card left. I think I asked him, "Can you break the pile?" And he's like, "No, I can't." And then my draw was just Tolarium, so I had just basically 2 lands left in my hand, and my opponent was very good. There's no way that they are gonna miss the pile. I made them do it, and then I lost. So this was the tournament for me. I was 2-2. I still played because Matt, me, and Calvin were in a team, and there were like benefits for the team. And also, I was here. I was driving everyone. Like half the team was in my car, and so I was already just I had to be there. So yeah, that was the end of my tournament, and so from here on out, I'm just gonna explain, I guess, go much less into it because the important part comes from Matt at this point. So for you, round 5, I think this is the win and right? So if you win this, you can draw in twice unless you get down paired. So by the end of round 5, there's gonna be 3 5-0s.
Yep. So unfortunately, one of the 5-0s was going to be down paired and have to play. But for the other 2, we'd be able to draw and then draw again to be guaranteed top 8 and get a piece of power. I was paired against Bosch. Bosch and Roll, for those of you who know, is a very talented Magic player, as well as a big member of the community via his videos and posts. I knew that coming into this event, he had decided to play Oath, and that he was going to be on the blue-green variant of Oath, so he doesn't have the Tinkers, the Vamp, Demonic Tutors, but you have a cleaner mana base, and you've got some other perks from being blue-green. So game 1, I look at my opening hand, I see that I have a turn 3 Vault Key with a Force and Fluster backup, so I'm able to quickly assemble the Vault Key, and even though he played Oath, it didn't really matter because I just got the Vault Key down and took infinite turns. Game 2, we're going back and forth on card advantage spells, countering each other, and I reached this window where I realize as my Saga is going to crack and I can get my Black Lotus, I can use Mystical Tutor for Tinker and have Hexing Squelcher to be able to do it all, but I would be having to use my land drop, which meant if I had a land on top, I would have to pass back to him, and that could be bad. I decided, though, that with the Squelcher and me being able to do stuff the following turn, that this would be a okay risk, so I decided to go for it. I made my land drop, I played the Squelcher, played the Tinker, and I look at an island on top of the deck. But I'm still thinking, this is fine. I've got a stock up in my hand, and I can do stuff next turn. As I pass the turn to him, he Besages the Bold Citadel, and unfortunately from there, I stock up, flow state, and don't find anything to really push through. And with him having dropped 2 Oaths the turn before, I pass back to him, and he goes Atraxa, Oko, Time Walk, he gets rid of my Squelcher, he does the same thing again, and looking at my hand, I do have a Yawgmoth's Will. No, I have a Time Twister and a Time Walk, and I'm thinking if I can draw Squelcher, I can at least Twister, and maybe I can make something of this. So I draw, I don't see Squelcher, I go for the time walk. I then flow state, which he forces. Go to my next turn. I don't draw another Squelcher, so I play the Twister knowing he's going to force it. He forces it and then beats me with a Traxa for the third time to do lethal. Game 3, I look at my hand and it is one of the strongest hands I could hope for, being Tolarian Academy, Moxes, Squelcher, and Vexing Bauble with Time Twister. So I go turn 1, Squelcher, Twister. Oh no, I go turn 1, Squelcher, Vexing Bauble with the Academy and pass to him. And he goes Forbidden Orchard and passes back to me with the Vexing Bauble stopping all the fast mana in his hand. And I then draw stock up, but I decided it'd be better for me to Twister here because I only have 2 cards in hand and Twister's a fresh 7. And there's no guarantee he's going to draw well, but I know that no matter what, I get 5 new cards. So I go for that. I hit him for 2. I play another Squelcher and a couple Moxen and pass to him. He then goes another Forbidden Orchard and plays Oath, giving me 2 Spirit tokens. When it gets back to me, I chain the Oath because I had drawn that from the Twister and beaten for, I think it was 8 damage. He passed back to him. He plays the Oath again. I then go DT Time Walk and swing in for lethal over the course of the 2 turns, guaranteeing me top 8 if I don't get the down pair the next round. And was super exciting. Was really happy to see the deck performing well. It had been doing very well into Oath in our testing, and this was just a showcase of why we wanted the deck, is these insane starts, as well as being able to play those long games.
Yeah, and it's kind of how's it called? Intuitive how Squelcher is that good against Oath, because it's like, oh, it's a creature you put into play for their Oath, you're enabling it, but literally like the only thing that kills you from Atraxa is that they draw counter spells, which you that just ignore. And like hitting you for 7 is just like a 2-turn to 3-turn clock sometimes, and so it's just like sometimes you don't care. The only bad hit is Wrath of Maggie, because that hits you for 14 that turn and then lethal the next one, and so that is where things can get a little spicy. But generally, it had been just basically very, very free to play against Oath in general. I don't think I've lost against Oath yet online either.
No, it's a very good matchup.
Yeah. For me, my round 5 opponent, I don't have what they were playing, but I think they were on Esper. And I remember, because this was very funny, it is one time where I tinkered turn 1 for Citadel, and from 20 I lost the game. Because I think I lost my mind. This is the one that I commented to you where I played Emerald and I had like Force of Will on top, and I don't know. At this point, I think because I'm already off of contention, I'm playing very, very loose. So I played Emerald, I forced the Emerald from the top, and then I found the Force from the top, and that meant like 8 life just to get 2 cards deeper, where you can just play it slow. And this is one of the things where, same thing that happened to me with Breach in Japan last year, where I'm basically learning or leveling up with the deck as I'm playing. A little too late, but yeah. And then the other 2 games were just a repeat. I'm thinking game 2, I also had Tinkerton 1 with protection, and my opponent had very little. I think at one point they resolved the Lavinia, and then when I drew my card for turn, my top card from the Citadel was Squelcher, and so I just played the Squelcher from the top and just kept going. And then I think round 3, so game 3 was interesting because my opponent opened Strip Mine, Triple Moxen, so basically Jet, Sapphire, and Pearl, and that's it. I think I went Ruby Land. I passed turn. They looked. They drew and passed, and so here I was like, okay, you have no land. I abraded their Sapphire, and they had to force it. Oh, I think they tried to stock up actually. Maybe that's why they were tapped, because they forced pitching Piers. I think they stocked up, and then they didn't get the land, and I'm like, okay, well, I'm just going for you. They had to drop the Force, and then I started playing like Moxen and stuff. And I think the thing for me was like, okay, you have 3 Moxen and no blue source, so you cannot like legally Stony silence me right now. So I kept trying to dig for more mana source, for more artifact mana. At one point I think I had Tolarian in play, but they were I think that they were super afraid of like Saga or something, because they never popped the Strip Mine. And so eventually, I think this game I won without having to tinker or do anything. I would just have like an insane amount of mana. I think I had like 14 mana by turn 4 or something like that, and just kept stocking up and having like what's it called, squelch into play, and then every time that they would try to plow it, I would just force it, because at that point I'm like, you just have nothing to, you're not putting any pressure on, so I just keep going. And I think eventually they just conceded, because I think they were at like 8 from the squelcher. I played the second squelcher and I make a construct, and then it's like if you try to plow something, you're just losing 4 life from the 2 wards, and so at that point they just conceded. So end of this round. And here we see the standards. We had Matt, Tony, and Hank, all 3 on 5-0s. And so there's going to be one person that is down paired, which was Hank. So from here on out, you drew with Tony. I think Hank won.
No, he actually ended up losing.
Oh, he lost. True. Was it?
He lost to the Raker player that I based on.
Mark. No.
Yeah. 1 second, let me pull up his name real quick.
Is it this one? It's just like
Jeremy Denker, who I faced round 3.
Yeah.
And he asked before the match what this person was on, and I told him, "Hey, it's Raker."
Damn. Yeah, this person. So you drew with Tony, and then who did you draw with? Mark or Bob?
Yeah, I drew with Mark after my last match.
So round 7 you also drew, and then Tony also drew. So just very quickly for me, round 6 I played against Brandon. Brandon and I had a small feud going on, obviously all in friendly terms, because when we went to their city to play a monthly vintage, he and I were in the finals and I won. And then when we had this event in NYSE in Hex, he and me were again in the finals and he won. And so this time it was like, we need to, get the event straight. I think for me, Game 1 was like one of the most broken things that I had. I think I had like Vault Key turn 1 with like Mox, Soul Ring, like not even with Mana Creep, which sometimes can mess you up with those, but it was just like mana, and like Tolarian, I think, Time. Like literally, my opponent didn't play a card, so that was fun. Game 2, I didn't play a card. They turn 1, I think I mulled to 5 or something, and they turn 1 Golem me with my handful of Mox, and I know, like, it's one of those things where like this deck is a little scary to play sometimes, because a range of Mox Lorien is in your range to keep, and you have to be willing to just take those, and you have to force anything that stops you from getting your lands, and I couldn't, so I just died. And then game 3, I think they just had a turn 1 Masticore with a Sphere as well, I think, but nothing to do. They kept discarding Workshops and lands to the Masticore. So I think at 6, I think after they attacked me 3 times, I just break the Sphere and step, and then I tinkered for Portal, and I think they just scooped. Because at that point they showed me their hand that they was just mana, and I'm like, I'm just gonna get the Masticore. I don't even need to attack you with the Masticore, it's just a blocker. Every turn I just gonna sacrifice it on the app because there's just 2 triggers. Actually that doesn't work, right? Because the Portal needs to target. So yeah, yep. It's still a little clunky, but from them I think, because obviously at this point nothing matters, right? Like this tournament is just top 8. Top 8 gets something, everyone else gets nothing. In fact, here we had like a 9th person that was also like bubbled out. So yeah, I got like a deck box last year, and I think this time I got like a shoe box or something that was pretty. But yeah. Anyway, quarterfinals. So right now, interesting is Dan was also in the team. He was just playing the POs, the slower PO flows did. Important to talk before we go on is that in this top 8 there were 8 different decks. Yep. Which was very, very cool to see. We had Raker, this like Jeskai Lurus PO, but very, very controlling. Like you can see here, there's like no Opal, no Mana Crib, no Mana Vault. It's just all on the... You're just swinging, you're just stacking sideways, and like this, what's it called? This fourth link is very much the finisher. Finisher. We had our Tinker version, Tony's version of Jewel, which I think is just extremely much better, like strictly superior than the normal build. I just think that people don't know how to play it, and I think these 2 decks I think are just gonna be the big disruptors of the new format, because people were not aware of these 2 decks, I think. And now that at least I think our list is solved pretty much. The sideboard has to change, obviously, because it was exclusively for this meta, but this one is going to be seeing play. I think this Jewel deck is also much better. Just people don't know how to play it yet. And then we had another Sphere with 2 smokestack. Holy, that is... This list is so good. Or looks so cool. It's so cool. Just like the smokestack comeback has been pretty funny. And then we had Bosch on Oath, another Esper, and then this Grixis PO that Hank was piloting with Breach and DT. So a much, much greedier PO list. One Squelcher, which I think has to be incorrect. 14 sideboard has to be wrong too. And then...
It's 14 cyber because of the Loris.
Oh, yeah. True, you're correct. And then
That's a melee
no
thing.
Snapcaster, which I guess doesn't make sense because you have Underworld Breach. Yeah. Okay, so top 8, run us through it. You were 3rd seed and you played against Bosch, which you already had played, right?
Yeah. So going into the rematch, I was feeling pretty high because I knew I had power, and I've never had power before, so super excited no matter what I get. But I came there to win, so I was locked in on beating Bosch again, knowing this was a good matchup. So game 1, I keep a hand that's got Mox, Squelcher, Ancestral, Time Walk, Yogg-Will, Demonic Tutor, and I'm just on cloud 9 because I drop Squelcher turn 1. Turn 2, I go Ancestral, Time Walk. The next turn, I go Demonic Tutor for Black Lotus, Yogg-Will. And he scoops to that just because I'm going to get to Ancestral again, Time Walk again, have Lotus another time, as well as DT for whatever I want. So even though the game wasn't fully over, the amount of card advantage and just advantage from that position is pretty much insurmountable. So it was a pretty quick scoop to my hand that was insane. Game 2, I look at my hand. I see that I don't really have much going on with that first hand. I don't have a force, and I don't have any. I have one Moxen, so my plays would be turn 2 stock up was from that first hand, so I mulligan that away. And I keep a hand that's land, Squelcher, force, flow state, Lorien. And my thought is I have 2 forces if I need to, but if I don't, then I can Lorien for the second land, and I'm going to be pretty safe from everything. He goes Forbidden Orchard, Mox, and Oath, which I force. He forces back, and I force again. I then top deck Black Lotus, and I play land. I play the Black Lotus, and I pass. He passes back. I draw Flow State. No, I draw Stock Up, which I jam the Stock Up. I then draw land, Flow State, which I play. He then passes back to me. I then play the Squelcher, having drawn Force of Will with another Flow State in hand. And I slowly I'm hitting him for 3 every turn. I keep drawing more cards. And I Gataxian Probe, and his hand is at this point 2 Atraxas, 2 Besajus. So I know that he's nowhere close to anything. And I keep attacking. Eventually he gets enough to cast Raph and Mickey. But by the time that happened, I had a Force in hand with the blue card and a Chain of Vapor. So I let the first one go through, Chain of Vapor, hit him. He rolls the dice on his Mana Crypt, and that's the lethal damage. But even if it wasn't, with the Force in my hand, there was no card he could draw that would stop the game from being over. And that secured me into the top 4. And this whole game, I'm saying a lot happened and a lot did, but we were the first ones done in top 8. I think we were done in 11 minutes. The judge came over to look at our match, and he was like, "Wait, you guys are already over?"
Mm-hmm.
It was just a super quick match, and just showed off the deck could stop whatever it needed to stop, but also just do these insane things and rebuild very quickly.
Yeah. So then from here, Ricker beat Hank on the PO deck. I think Dan beat Esper, because this is just literally the worst. Esper wants to play against basically any other thing, but except for this. Jessica just completely demolishes this version. You beat Bosch, as we said, and then Tony beat Sphere. This matchup, I think, is relatively bad for Spheres. I think, especially if you're on the draw, it's just basically impossible. I have to assume, because most of your thing doesn't work because they also have a ton of mana, and Tony's version explicitly because it has a lot more mana than the regular version. Okay.
And having Chaos Defiler lets you beat the Null Rods, which normal Jewel just would fold to.
It's very hard for them. They also the Oboro, so not Oboro,
Yep.
It's Castle in the Sky, or it's called. This is a pretty cool. What is it? Oboro Plus in the Clouds. There you go. This card, super good.
Lets you filter mana to have the double blue that you need.
So Tony was playing against Raker Shops, and it took a while. This match I remember was like grindy and long and stuff, and eventually Matt won. You played against Dan,
Dan,
but Dan was on the play. Yeah,
Dan
because
was
they
on the
were
play. Yes.
second. And this match was to me. I was watching in the silence. I will let Matt talk about it, but to me, it was the match of the tournament for by a lot. It was very very cool. Go ahead.
I fully agree. This was my favorite match because one, we're in the top four and it's with one of our testing partners, so we're having fun with it. Obviously, we're both trying our best to win because we want to get to the finals. We want to win that Black Lotus, but
Yeah.
we've been bantering and like talking during sideboarding, and we're having a good time with it while still playing very tightly.
Yeah. Also,
Um,
just of note, there were seven of us in the team, which is almost 10%, not 10, but like 8 to 9% of the tournament. This was the first team kill of the
yeah,
whole tournament. None of us matched at all, which I thought was very cool too.
I fully agree, and also just all of our team did well. I think the worst was Kelvin on X3. Ace had to leave early to go hang out with a friend after he was out. So he left at 2-2, but our whole team performed very well. So I was very happy to see how we all did. And very happy we didn't team kill, like you said, because it seemed very unlikely. But going into the Dan matchup, game one, I'm looking at my hand. It's got card advantage and Squelcher. It's what I want because I'm not going to die quickly unless they have a quick fourth. So I start going for it. I play my Squelcher, and I feel like I'm about to pull ahead with the game. And that's when he drops Squelcher into Flame of Anor, and he had a trainer out. So not only was he drawing two cards, but he got rid of my Squelcher, and now he had the Squelcher advantage, which was game one is going to happen a lot because they have more removal and they had the same amount of Squelchers as us. So he was able to pull ahead pretty hard. He was countering my card spells, drawing cards, and just kind of just dumpstering on my deck. There was really not much I could do. Game two, he had brought in the Null Rods, which we knew about because the deck it was open deck list, but also we'd worked together. We knew each other's decks inside and out, and I knew they was gonna have Null Rods, so I kept hands that were a bit land heavier than I usually would in this matchup, if it were a typical PM. And we get to it where this game only I have the Squelcher, and I'm countering his card draw spells, and eventually he drops Null Rod, but I only have one Moxen. He has two, and he has a Thalarian out, so I just didn't want to force the Null Rod go down on cards when it was going to hurt him more than me. So I let that resolve, and he's top decking more Moxen. I'm top decking artifacts too, but I'm not playing them because of the Brainstorm that's in the deck, so I wanted to try and keep them in hand until I had Brainstorm to get them out. But eventually, because of Squelcher letting me counter his important spells but resolve mine, I got to a point where I could Brainstorm to put the cards back, but I found the Time Vault with that Brainstorm. So, funnily enough, I put back Ancestral Recall and Black Lotus, one of the weirdest things to put on top of your deck. But then I just played Time Vault Key and abraded his Null Rod, and with a Squelcher out, he couldn't stop it. So that was infinite turns, and the game was over. Game three, we both kept pretty solid hands. Where my hand was a turn three Tinker, or turn four if I wanted to drop Squelcher, and his hand was a lot of mana with Thalarian and a Squelcher and an Otter. So his turn two, he drops Squelcher, and I'm looking at my hand and I'm thinking, what am I going to do here? I know he only has three cards in hand and a Lurrus, so four cards total. Do I just jam? If he forces, I just lose the game at that point. Like, he's going to pull up so far ahead. But if it resolves, I think I can win this game. And so I basically I tell him, like, well, I got to make you have it. Drop the Tinker, and he says, unfortunately, that resolves. I shuffle my library and pass it to him. He cuts it. I get a Braid on top, immediately kill the Squelcher into flow states and a couple more card draw spells. But I stop after a little bit when I'm at 10 life, deciding to not go further because I have Crypt on the battlefield and I don't really need to be going super low because what if I don't end up hitting the cards I need to just win on the spot or get rid of the Crypt? So I decided to stop there. He plays his Lurrus. I don't counter it because I'm about to drop my Squelcher. And we get to this point where I lose two Crypt Lips. He's not swinging in with Lurrus because I had another Squelcher I'd played after the Lotus, but it's very tense because if I lose one more crypt flip, I lose the game. But I have 2 stock ups in my hand, and my decision is I need to go for Yawgmoth's Will to be able to get the Abrade or Tinker from the yard and stop this crypt from killing me. I don't find it on the first stock up, no tutors, nothing to get it. But on the second stock up, I find the Yawgmoth's Will, and I find a Force of Will, which lets me hold up Force for all this when I'm down to 2 life. After that, I look at the top of my library and I see Key. So I start by going Black Lotus, Crack, Yawgmoth's Will, which resolves. I then play the key from my library. He Mental Missteps. I hard cast Mental Misstep back. I Tinker, and that was the game. And I was guaranteed the finals. It was a super tense game, a lot of fun. And thank you so much to Dan for being an amazing teammate. Your write-ups were so important during the testing, and it was great having you on the team and having another team member be in the top 8. Top 4.
Yeah, I think for me this matchup really pointed what, like, the Squelcher is not just a death sentence. You have to just play around it because I remember Dan said when he cast the Squelcher before you tinkered is that he had Pyroblast in hand, and so that decision of like, oh, do I tap out for the Squelcher just to set up, and then that's the window that you can just like sometimes you just have to send it, and that was kind of thing. And then on the other table, Tony versus Jeremy, because of standings. Jeremy was the top seed because he had to play it out through 2-7-1. And so we wanted Tony to either Tony wins, which is an difficult matchup also because he's very, very good, but you would be on the play, or Jeremy wins, and in which case it's an incredibly good matchup, but we are on the draw. And so ultimately Tony was the one that went to the finals, and so it was you versus him on the last match. You were on the play.
Yep. And it was really cool because both of our decks, which I think, like we mentioned at the beginning and Audrey mentioned, are going to really take the meta by storm, I think, after this. But both of us have been undefeated all day. So one of us had to lose, and one of us had to go home without the Lotus undefeated. One of us got to be undefeated all day and take the Lotus. So it was a very important final match. But also, we both knew that we had great days. Our decks worked very well. We came to the event prepared. And no matter what the outcome, we were going to be very happy that we did so well. So game 1, we both mulled a 5, and I keep a very strong hand. I have Ancestral, Mox, Land, Hull Breacher, and I forget the last card. Oh, Forcible. So I go my turn 1, I play my Mox, my Land, I pass to him an Ancestral, and he goes for a very strong turn 1 where he drops some mana rocks, a land, and goes Transmute Artifact with 4 mana up. So I know I have to force this, otherwise he's going to get the 1 ring. And I didn't want to give him the chance to have that yet, because I had not gotten the mana I needed for the Hull Breacher. So I forced that 1 ring, and then he just hardcast 1 ring from his hand. Following that, I draw the mana I need, I play the Hull Breacher, and pass to him thinking I'm in a very good spot. He immediately copies my Hull Breacher with his Phyrexian Metamorph. And we're kind of looking back and forth at one another, not doing much, with the 1 ring hurting him for a couple turns. But then he drops Urza Saga, and I know that I'm on a clock. Now, his life total is a bit low because he's been losing mana crypt flips, he's been taking a damage each turn, and I'm thinking maybe I can find something fast enough to be able to get there. I do end up finding Key, but I didn't think about it until I passed the turn over already. Had I made my Hull Breacher unblockable, I would make it so he would have to lose his 4th mana crypt flip, but if he did, he would lose the game. And I didn't think about it at the time, so by passing to him, I ended up losing that game. It was locked. The beats were going to come in with the constructs, and I wasn't going to be able to do much. So that was a mistake on my part. But even had I not made the mistake, there was a chance he wins the mana crypt flip, and I still lose the game. But it's important to play tight. But having been up since 4 a.m. that day, I just made a silly mistake, and that happens.
Yeah, I think the only other point there was like whether to Hull Breacher on their turn before.
Yeah.
But I think it's just like Tony, I don't think was gonna fall for it. So I think I also agree with just playing in main deck when you just guarantee that there's not gonna happen. And I think your hand also didn't help you have 2 extra mana at that point. I think your draws were pretty bad. After that, I think your last draw was like it was a saga or something. Because I was like live casting this on the Discord because I was sitting behind Matt. So there's like a record of this entire finals, which was pretty. I was just like struggling because it was just pretty it was just so rough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And another thing was I drew Time Twister right after he copied my
That was very
Hull
funny.
Breacher.
That was very
So
funny. In a bad
had
way.
he not copied it, I think I just won the game right there.
Oh yeah,
But
100%.
that was very funny to draw the one card that does literally nothing but hurt me after he played the Metamorph.
And I think then game 2, you also had to go to 5.
I did. It was a really rough one where my first hand did literally nothing. It was one land that did mana, Tolarian, and then blue cards and forces. So I just couldn't do anything with that hand, so I mulliganed. The next hand was all right. I had land, Mox, opposition agent, mystical tutor, stock up flow state, and I just decided I think I can get a better 5 card hand than this because I've got no permission in that hand. I can't really cast anything other than the mystical tutor. I need to be on board faster because otherwise I'm just going to lose the game. So I multiply and I keep a hand that's all right. I have Hull Breacher, Opposition Agent, Mox Jet, Urza Saga, and Ancestral Recall. And if I find any mana, I get the Opposition Agent or Hull Breacher as well as Ancestral. So I just have to keep that hand. And I play my land, my Mox Jet, and I pass to him, and he gets a turn 1, the One Ring. And I'm thinking, okay, the game's not over yet. Next draw, I draw a Tinker. Pass back to him. He draws 2 more, and develops some mana, but doesn't really do much, and discards 2 to hand size. It gets back to me, and I know that this is the turn that I need to do something. As I get my Black Lotus, and I'm thinking, do I want to Tinker where I lose to force, or do I want to pass to him and be able to use the force of negation I just drew? I decide to pass to him, and he casts Hull Breacher. So I have the choice here of going Ancestral and one of my 3 drops on my end step, or to just be like, okay, this Ancestral is now force of negation fodder, and I'm going to try and get you with Hull Breacher or Opposition Agent, and maybe that'll be enough to secure the game. It's going to be really tight. But I decide to just pass and be like, Ancestral, you are now force of negation fodder. We get to his turn. He starts off by playing a defense grid, which I need to force because otherwise I'm doing nothing on this turn. And this is the one turn where I can maybe get back in. But following that, he plays Karn. And even if I had Hull Breacher down and got 2 treasure tokens, they would do nothing. The writing's on the wall. And that is the match. I reach out and shake his hand, congratulate him for winning the tournament, and I get my Mox Sapphire. It's obviously disappointing to come second because you end on a loss, but I can't help but be happy to have my first piece of power and to have done so well that day. I learned after that he didn't have force, so maybe if I had tinkered for Citadel, something comes there, but overall, I think beyond that one mistake that I made game 1, it was more so just you have many decisions, and the one that I made didn't work out with what he had. Not a misplay.
Yeah, but I think that it makes sense too. I mean, obviously in hindsight, it's easy to say, but like having a font to back up your Hull Breacher, like anything happens, you just like go Ancestral Hull Breacher or like Oppo Agent for something. Like even when they carned, we could have even went like, oh no, we don't have Ancestral anymore. No, I was like, you Hull Breacher, Ancestral them, and then you Oppo Agent. But even then, we're just facing a Karn with like nothing in our deck, in our hand anymore. So yeah, I mean, at that point, I understand not sending it because it's kind of like desperate, and also like Karn is a restricted card. You can't always just play around them having that stuff. But yeah, it was pretty well played, very well played by you, and well navigated by Tony. And yeah, it was pretty cool to be part of it. So that is our report. I think we're taking a little bit of a break because this was pretty grueling grinding that we had to do. And then, yeah, more content. I think we're going to start bringing more challenges. I think we also want to talk about restarting the expansion series. We'll see how that, or to recontinue it. I'm going to Oklahoma in a month, and so I'm also starting to practice for that. So yeah, I think next challenge we are by necessity have to play this deck again, and so we'll probably see if we
100%.
can stream it. That's
And
all for me. What about you, Matt? Any last comments?
I just want to say thank you so much to everyone who's been watching this throughout the whole video. It's awesome to have people taking a look at our content, and to everyone who's reached out to me since the event. I really appreciate you. It's been crazy having so many people like wanting to talk to me about the deck, our ideas. But really, I just want to say thank you so much to my teammates. Without you, this deck would not exist. It really took a piece of all of us over the 3 weeks of testing and having to drop leagues, not playing challenges, set up time to test together. Just thank you so much to everyone. And it was really cool to watch us all perform so well as a team and do this awesome thing. So I really appreciate you all. And thank you for taking the time to do that.